I never imagined the day I would sit in a courtroom and have my own daughter reveal a secret that would shake everything I thought I knew. Years of lies, betrayal, and heartbreak all came crashing down in a single moment, and the video she played left everyone in shock. This is the story of truth, courage, and the bond between a mother and her daughter that no one could break. I want you to walk with me through the kind of mourning that changes a life, because this is where my journey toward that courtroom truly began, and I need you to feel it the way I lived it. I woke up in a house that did not feel like home any longer. I lay there with my eyes open before the sun had even thought about rising, and I felt a heaviness on my chest that was not just sorrow and not just fear. It was the kind of weight a person carries after years of being blamed for storms they never called for and broken glass they never shattered. I had stayed in that marriage far longer than my spirit wanted, because I kept telling myself that vows mean something and family means something and love will one day grow again if you water it enough. I told myself I could fix things if I just tried harder, but child, there comes a day when even the strongest bucket can no longer patch a sinking ship. I sat up in that quiet room and I listened to the silence that followed my husband everywhere. A cold, heavy silence that meant he had already gone to work, or maybe gone somewhere else before work, or maybe gone to hide more secrets in corners he thought I would never look. I used to rise before him to make him breakfast and watch him leave, but those days had faded long ago, because somewhere along the way I learned that he only noticed effort when he wanted to judge it, and he only noticed kindness when he wanted to use it. So I took that silence as a small blessing that morning, and I allowed myself to breathe in a slow way that I had forgotten was possible. Now baby, you must know that I was not always this tired. I was a woman who laughed with her whole body and danced in the kitchen while stirring pots and said yes to life even when life said no right back. But years with a man who learned to twist my words and shrink my dreams and push my spirit down like dust settling on old shelves will take the shine off a woman. It will dull her smile. It will make her question her worth. And I had reached a point where my own reflection looked like someone I was borrowing from. I did not see myself any longer. I saw worry and doubt, and the quiet kind of ache that does not scream but still hurts every hour of the day. I heard footsteps in the hallway that morning, and I knew right away it was my daughter. She had her own room, but she often crept into mine like she used to when she was a little girl, even though she was nearly grown now. She had eyes that could read a soul, and she had learned to watch me like a person watches a candle flickering in the dark, afraid that the flame might blow out if a breeze slid under the door. She sat on the edge of my bed without saying a word, and I could tell her heart was fuller than her mouth could handle. She had been carrying worries of her own, worries that no child should ever have to carry about a marriage that is not even theirs. She asked me if I slept well, and I said I was fine, even though the truth sat behind my ribs like a heavy stone. She asked if I would eat breakfast with her, and I told her I needed a minute before coming downstairs. She looked at me too long with a sadness that made me want to scoop her up and tell her she never had to worry about me again, but before I could, she reached for my hand. She held it tight, not like a child seeking comfort but like a woman offering strength. And she whispered something I still hear in my sleep. She said, "Mama, you do not deserve this, and I do not think you even remember the woman you used to be." I felt my throat close, because she spoke truth I had been ducking for years. The kind of truth a mother does not want to hear from the mouth of her own child. I told her everything would be all right, because that is what mothers do, but even I did not believe it. And she knew. She kissed my hand and she walked out with tears she tried to hide behind her hair. I sat there alone after she left, and I tried to remember the moment my marriage began to crumble. It was not one moment. It was 1,000 small cuts spread across years. The first time he spoke sharply and I excused it as stress. The first time he lied and I excused it as forgetfulness. The first time he broke something precious and blamed me for leaving it too close to his anger. The first time he made me feel small, then said he was only joking. Those moments piled on each other like heavy bricks, until one day the walls around my heart were so thick that even light could not get in. And baby, there is a sorrow in pretending everything is fine when your soul is whispering help every night. I would lie awake and listen for car doors and footsteps and tones in his voice, because living with him turned my life into a guessing game. Which version of him would walk in today? The sweet version that promised change, or the cold version that found fault in everything, including the air I breathed? And I learned to place my joy on the back burner in order to keep the peace. But peace bought with silence is not peace at all. It is a cage decorated with fake flowers. That morning though something in me shifted. Maybe it was the way my daughter looked at me. Maybe it was the long years of carrying burdens that were not mine. Maybe it was the subtle whisper of God nudging my spirit to get up and walk toward freedom. But as I sat on the edge of that bed I felt a small spark in my chest. A tiny flicker of the woman I used to be. And that spark said enough. That spark said you are worthy of air that does not hurt to breathe. That spark said your daughter should not have to watch her mother crumble to dust. I stood up slowly like a newborn deer finding its legs. I walked to the mirror and looked at myself without flinching. I saw tired eyes but I also saw something else. I saw a survivor. I saw a woman who had been holding a house together with nothing but willpower and hope. I saw someone who had forgotten her own name under the weight of someone else's demands. And for the first time in years I whispered to myself, you deserve better. I went downstairs and found my daughter making tea. She looked up at me with surprise because she could feel the shift in the air. I sat down and I took her hand and I told her I was ready to stop pretending everything was fine. She did not speak. She just leaned her head on my shoulder and breathed out the kind of breath you let go of when you have been holding it too long. I did not know then everything she had already discovered. I did not know she had been paying closer attention to her father than I had realized. I did not know she had already gathered proof of the truths he had been hiding. I did not know that the video she had on her phone would one day shake a courtroom to its core. All I knew that morning was that something had finally changed inside me. A door had opened. A path had cleared. A woman had risen. When I tell you that the days between that morning and the day of my divorce hearing felt like walking through a fog-filled forest, I mean every word. I was moving forward but everything around me felt dense and heavy and uncertain. I was trying to gather pieces of myself after years of being chipped away, and that is no easy task, child. Healing is not a straight road. Sometimes you take a step forward and your past grabs your ankle and pulls you 2 steps back. Sometimes you think you are getting stronger only to find yourself crying while washing dishes because your heart remembers a hurt your mind tried to forget. That is how it was for me. I was waking up to truth, but I was also waking up to pain. My husband noticed the change almost right away. He could not always see my sadness, but he could smell my strength from a mile away, and honey, a man like him does not like when the woman he tried to control starts standing up taller. It scared him in ways he did not know how to hide. Suddenly he was overly polite in the mornings, bringing me coffee I never asked for, asking me how I slept, asking if I needed anything. To an outsider it would look like kindness, but to someone who knew him well it looked like strategy. He was trying to reel me back in. He could feel me slipping out of his grip. And Lord knows he could not stand the idea of losing control of the story he had written for our lives. He also started watching our daughter more closely. She noticed it immediately, and one night she came into my room and whispered that he was beginning to get suspicious. I asked her why she thought that, and she told me he had asked her questions about where she had been, about who she talked to, about why she was always near me. Child, I felt a chill slide down my spine hearing that, because when a man is hiding something and feels his secrets closing in, he starts throwing shadows everywhere, hoping they will land on anyone but him. During those days my daughter seemed to be carrying a secret of her own. She tried to hide it, but a mother can always feel when her child is holding something heavy. She started spending more time in her room with the door shut, and when she came out she always looked like someone who had just finished crying, or someone who had just made a decision she was not ready to share. I asked her many times if she needed to talk, and she would smile with that same sad softness and tell me she was working on something. Just working on something. That became her favorite phrase. I did not push. She had grown into a young woman who had seen too much and understood too deeply for her age. She had lived in a house with 2 parents, but only one of them truly saw her. She learned early how to read silence and how to survive tension. So I let her work. I let her carry what she felt she needed to carry, because some battles a mama cannot fight for her child no matter how much she longs to. One afternoon while my husband was at work, I decided to finally gather documents for the divorce hearing. I sat in the living room with papers spread all over the coffee table like a map of years I wished I could rewrite. There were bills I paid alone, promises he broke, vacations he ruined, messages he sent to other women, responsibilities he never took. Every paper I touched reminded me of moments I had swallowed for the sake of peace and moments I had forgiven far too quickly. I felt myself shaking as I sorted them because I was not just organizing documents. I was facing the story of my own life and seeing clearly for the first time how much of myself I had lost while trying to hold a marriage together. As I worked, my daughter came downstairs and froze in the doorway when she saw the piles. She looked at me as though she had stepped into a page of a book she knew was coming but still wished she could rewrite. She crossed the room, slowly sat beside me and touched one of the papers with her fingertips like it was something fragile or sacred. Then she took a deep breath, the kind you take when you are gathering courage, and said, "Mama, I think there is something you need to see." My heart thumped hard in my chest. Because her voice was trembling. She unlocked her phone, scrolled for a moment and then handed it to me without saying another word. On the screen was a video. I did not know what I was about to watch, but my body already knew it would hurt. It began with a door opening and the camera shaking slightly as she held it. Then I heard voices. His voice. My husband's voice. A voice I had known for decades, a voice that once made me feel safe and loved and chosen but lately made me feel small and wrong and tired. He was talking to someone. A woman. I did not recognize her at first, but the tone between them was not the tone of strangers. It was too close, too familiar, too careless. He spoke with ease, he laughed in a way he had not laughed with me in years. He touched her arm and she did not pull away. I watched as they stood in our home in the kitchen I had cooked in while he told me he was working late. I watched as he leaned in close as if sharing a secret. I watched the kind of betrayal that has no sound yet screams louder than thunder. For a moment I could not breathe. My body froze but my heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. My daughter reached for my hand but I could barely feel her. All I could feel was the sting of realizing that the ache in my marriage had never been just in my head. The coldness, the distance, the excuses, the nights he came home smelling like perfume that was not mine, it all made sense in a clear, sharp way that cut deep. My daughter whispered, "Mama, I did not want to show you this until the right time, but I could not let him keep lying to you. I could not let him keep hurting you. And I could not let him walk into court and twist everything around like he always does." She said she had recorded the video weeks before the hearing when she suspected something was wrong and followed her own father quietly one afternoon. She had kept it to protect me. I stared at her because she was still a child in my eyes, yet she had stepped into a role she should never have needed to fill. She had become the witness, the protector, the truth teller. Tears rolled down my face, not just from betrayal but from the heartbreak of realizing my daughter had lived in a home where she had to document her father's behavior to keep her mother safe. I asked her why she had waited to show me. She said because she wanted to be sure I was ready to act. She wanted me to stand strong, not break. And when I woke up that morning with a new fire in my spirit, she said she knew I was finally ready. Those words struck me like a bell. My daughter had been watching my strength grow little by little, like a gardener watching a seed push through soil. She had waited until she saw me choosing myself before placing something so heavy in my hands. But child, what hurt even more was that she had been carrying this alone. The guilt of that shook me. I wrapped my arms around her and pulled her into me, and she finally let the tears fall. We held each other for a long time, two women bound by pain but rising into courage together. When my husband returned home later that day, he sensed something was wrong. He asked questions, but for once I said nothing. I looked at him with a calmness he was not used to, and it rattled him. He paced, he talked, he tried to charm me, he tried to distract me, but I spoke only when necessary. And inside, my heart was not breaking anymore. It was sharpening. It was strengthening. It was preparing. Because now I knew that the hearing would not just be the end of a marriage. It would be the moment truth stepped out of the shadows. And I was no longer walking into it alone. My daughter had given me something more powerful than evidence. She had given me clarity. She had given me courage. She had given me the strength to walk into that courtroom not as a victim but as a woman reclaiming her life. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes her child has grown eyes that see more than she ever intended them to see. And as much as it hurts to admit it, my daughter had been seeing long before I ever allowed myself to look. She had been studying the house, the moods. The changes, the shadows, the silences, and all the pieces of a marriage that was held together by fear and habit instead of love and respect. I used to think I was protecting her by pretending things were fine, but children always know better. They hear what you try to smooth over. They feel what you try to hide. They understand what you cannot bear to say out loud. My daughter proved all that and more long before she ever pressed record on that phone. It started subtly, a shift in the way she watched him. A stiffness in her shoulders when she heard his keys in the door. A softness in her voice when she spoke to me after he raised his own. She used to run to him when she was little, but as she grew older she began stepping back, letting him come to her but never fully reaching out. She was learning how to navigate around him the same way I had learned to move through that house, measuring my words and my footsteps just to keep the peace. And child, nothing breaks your heart like watching your child copy your survival skills without ever being taught. One evening months before the divorce hearing, I was in the kitchen cooking dinner. Something simple, something I could make quickly because he had called saying he was bringing someone from work over without warning. My daughter was sitting at the counter doing homework, her pencil tapping rhythmically against her notebook. She looked up at me and asked, "Mama, why do you always look tired before he gets home?" The question hit me so hard I dropped the spoon I was holding. I laughed it off, gave some weak excuse, but she did not push. She simply watched me with eyes that saw right through every lie I tried to offer. That was the first time I realized she was studying everything. But I was not ready then. I brushed it aside and told myself she was imagining things. Lord have mercy, the lies we tell ourselves just to keep going. Months passed and the cracks in the marriage grew louder. My husband started arguing more often, not about big things but about anything he could twist into a problem. Dinner too late. Laundry not folded the way he liked. Bills too high. Noise too loud. Lights too dim. Shoes in the wrong place. He always chose something small to explode about because small things were easier to use as weapons. And every time he raised his voice, my daughter would quietly step into the hallway and listen. She never interfered, but she never walked away either. She told me later she wanted to be close in case things ever went too far. One night after he had gone out for hours without explanation, she came to my room with her hair still damp from a shower and asked if she could sleep beside me like she used to when she was little. I said yes, and she curled up next to me, her head on my shoulder. She whispered, "Mama, I do not feel safe when he is around." My whole soul ached hearing those words. I held her close and told her everything would be alright, even though I had not believed that in a long time. That was when she started paying even closer attention. She began remembering details, noting patterns, noticing behaviors that I was too exhausted or too broken to recognize anymore. She watched how he treated me in public versus private. She listened for the shift in his footsteps when he came home in a bad mood. She sensed when he was lying before I did. And child, she wrote it all down. Not physically at first, but in her mind, where the truth stayed alive even when I tried to bury it. The day she decided to record him was the day she realized she could not trust him to ever tell the truth. I had been working late and she came home early from school because she was not feeling well. She walked into a quiet house expecting to see him sleeping on the couch or watching TV, but instead she heard voices coming. From the kitchen, a woman's voice, soft, familiar, too familiar. My daughter stayed in the hallway at first, listening with her heart pounding, but then something in her rose up, something bold, something courageous, something that comes from a long line of women who choose truth over comfort. She quietly pulled out her phone, pressed record, and stepped closer. She did not barge in, she did not confront him, she did not cry. She observed, she documented, she protected herself and me in a way no child should ever have to do. When she told me this later, her voice was steady but her hands were shaking. She did not record him out of anger. She recorded him out of love for me. But what she saw him do that day was only part of what changed her. What changed her more deeply was what she saw in me. She saw me shrinking. She saw me becoming quieter. She saw me apologizing for things that were never my fault. She saw me folding myself into smaller versions just to keep the peace. She saw me forgetting who I used to be. She saw me losing myself piece by piece until there were days I did not even look like myself in the mirror. She once told me, "Mama, you used to laugh all the time. You used to sing while cleaning and dance while cooking. You used to smile just because the sun came through the windows. And now you only smile when he is not home. Those words stuck to my ribs like cold truth. During key point 3, the shift in her happened slowly but powerfully. She started refusing to accept the version of the family he tried to portray. She stopped laughing at his jokes. She stopped seeking his approval. She stopped trying to fix a home she knew was not safe or healthy. She started protecting me in tiny ways that felt small but meant everything. She would sit beside me at dinner so he could not talk down to me without her hearing. She would call me whenever she was away from home just to check on me. She would offer to help me with chores when she saw I was too mentally drained to stand. She would hug me longer than usual after arguments, sensing that my spirit needed anchoring. But the biggest shift came when she realized the only way to save us was to gather proof, because men like him do not crumble under emotion, they crumble under evidence. Once that clicked for her, she became observant to every detail, every contradiction, every secret he tried to hide. She noticed when he left the house dressed nicer than usual. She noticed when he changed his cologne. She noticed when he turned his phone face down on the table. She noticed when he came home too happy or too tired or too defensive. She noticed when he complimented her too much out of nowhere. She noticed when he avoided eye contact. She noticed when he smiled at texts he would not show us. She noticed when he deleted call logs before walking into the house. All of it she saw. All of it she stored away. And all of it helped her make one life-changing choice. She told me she knew I would never leave him without undeniable proof, because I still believed in the man he used to be, the man who had loved me once, or at least the man I thought he was. She said, "Mama, sometimes women need to see with their eyes what their hearts have already known for years." When she said that, it knocked the wind out of me, because she was right. I had been ignoring my own instincts for so long that my daughter had to step in and show me the truth she had been seeing long before I had the courage to accept it. Key point 3 is the truth that children become witnesses long before adults become honest. It is the truth that my daughter did not record that video out of curiosity but out of necessity. It is the truth that she saw the danger I kept hiding from. It is the truth that she grew up watching me break quietly until she gathered the strength to hold the truth loudly. It is the truth that she did not betray her father by documenting what he did. She protected her mother by refusing to pretend anymore. There is a certain kind of silence that fills a home right before the truth breaks through the walls. It is not peaceful and it is not calm. It is tight like a held breath and heavy like a storm waiting for its moment. That is what the house felt like in the days leading up to the hearing. My daughter walked around with something on her mind, something she had not yet shared, and I could feel it in the air like electricity. She was carrying weight she should never have had to carry alone, but she was strong enough to stand beneath it even though she was still just a girl. I remember the night she recorded the second video, the one she later called the video she should never have needed to make. I did not know she was awake. I did not know she had slipped out of her room. I did not know she had followed him quietly with that same calm determination she always had when she sensed something was wrong. She told me the truth much later, but the way she described that moment felt like listening to a story no mother wants to hear. She said she was lying in bed because she could not sleep. She kept hearing something downstairs, a soft thud, then a low whisper, then footsteps that did not match mine. She sat up listening and realized he was up roaming the house at nearly 2 in the morning. He always said he needed space to think at night, but she had learned that his late-night thinking usually involved secrets he did not want anyone to see. So she got out of bed quietly and opened her door slowly enough that it would not make a sound. She said she felt something pulling her forward, something inside her telling her not to ignore this moment. And sometimes, sugar, that inner voice is God tapping your shoulder. She crept down the stairs one step at a time, holding her breath almost as if the quiet would keep her invisible. She stayed close to the wall and reached the bottom step, and that is when she heard him speaking again. Not to another woman this time. Not to a friend. He was talking to himself. But it was the way he was talking that alarmed her. His tone was frustrated, sharp, cutting through the dark like a blade. He was muttering about lies and money and me. He was pacing back and forth with his hands in his hair as if he were trapped in a conversation with his own guilt. My daughter raised her phone again, not because she wanted to spy on him but because she knew something was deeply wrong. She told me, she whispered to herself, Mama needs to know the truth. She moved closer, hiding behind the corner wall, and the camera caught everything. The way he slammed his fist on the counter. The way he cursed under his breath. The way he said he was tired of pretending. The way he said he had someone else waiting for him. The way he said he could not keep playing family. The way he said he deserved better than me. The way he said I should just accept things the way they were. She said her heart broke hearing those words, but what frightened her more was the shift in his voice when he said one sentence that made her freeze. He said, if she tries to take anything from me, I will make sure she regrets it. Those were his words, cold, sharp, filled with intention, not said in anger, said with certainty. My daughter told me that was the moment she realized he was not just unfaithful. He was dangerous. She said she felt her hands shaking as she held the phone, but she kept recording because something in her spirit told her this video would matter someday. It would protect us. It would show the truth behind the gentle mask he wore in public. It would reveal the man he tried to hide from everyone, including himself. She stayed only a few minutes longer until she heard him start walking toward the hallway. She rushed back up the stairs quietly, her heart pounding so hard she thought he would hear it. She closed her door and slid under the covers, hoping he would not come upstairs. He did not. He stayed downstairs, pacing, arguing with his own lies. Until the early morning hours. The next day she could barely meet my eyes. I saw something in her stare, something older than her age, something bruised, something brave, something protective. I thought it was just fear about the divorce hearing, but now I know she was carrying knowledge she had not yet shared with me. Knowledge that sat heavy on her chest like a stone. Over the next few days she watched him more closely than ever. She started staying near me whenever he was in the room, not out of fear for herself but fear for what he might say or do. She said she kept asking herself, when is the right time to tell Mama? When will she be ready to hear the whole truth? She waited because she did not want to break me. She waited because she did not want to hand me more pain than I was already holding. She waited because she was still a child trying to protect her mother from the harshness of reality. But truth has a way of pushing itself to the surface. The night before the hearing she finally came into my room with that same heaviness in her eyes. She sat beside me on the bed, took a deep breath and said, Mama, there is something I have to tell you, something I cannot keep to myself anymore. I looked at her and felt a cold wave run over me, like the air itself had changed. She unlocked her phone and pressed play. And there it was, her second video, his words, his threats, his cruelty dripping through every sentence. I watched it in silence, my heart twisting with each sound. I felt a mixture of heartbreak and fury and grief and strange relief all at once, because finally the truth was no longer in the shadows. It was right in front of me, undeniable, unshakable, unmasking everything he had tried to hide. As the video played, my daughter watched my face carefully. She told me later she was afraid I would shatter, but what she saw instead was something surprising to both of us. She saw me straighten my back. She saw me inhale deeply. She saw me nod slowly, as if finally acknowledging something I had always sensed but never allowed myself to accept. She saw strength rise in me like a tide. I told her softly, thank you, baby. Thank you for letting me see the truth. She burst into tears, but I held her because the pain she carried was never hers to hold. She was a child forced into a role far too mature for her age. She was the witness I never asked for. She was the protector no child should ever have to become. Yet she did it because she loved me in a way that healed even while it hurt. Key point 4 is this. That video should never have existed. No child should have to document their parents' darkness. No daughter should have to record evidence to protect her mother. No young girl should have to tiptoe around midnight secrets with a phone in her hand and fear in her chest. But she did, because the truth living in the dark was more dangerous than the truth brought into the light. And she chose light even though it burned her. That was the moment I knew that the hearing would be more than a legal decision. It would be the unveiling of a reality he had worked years to hide. It would be the moment the world saw not the man he pretended to be but the man he truly was. And it would be the moment I stood not as a broken woman but as a mother who had finally opened her eyes because her daughter had been brave enough to show her the truth. That night as she slept curled beside me, I looked at her and whispered a promise to myself. I would never again let her carry the weight of my silence. I would never again let her protect me alone. I would never again allow myself to shrink so small that my child had to step into the space I abandoned. The truth she revealed changed everything. Not just the hearing, not just the marriage, but me. I remember sitting there in that stiff wooden courtroom chair feeling the edge digging into the back of my legs as if the whole building wanted to remind me that life had turned rough enough to bruise. I watched the judge lean back a little and fold his hands, and I knew he was the kind of man who had seen it all and carried none of it home with him. I wished I could say the same. My life felt like it had been scraped open and poured out on the table for strangers to examine. And now it was time for what they called the fifth point of the hearing, though nobody in that courtroom knew it meant anything more than another stage in a legal process. To me it was the moment my spirit had to take a deep breath and keep standing, because everything I believed about my marriage, my daughter and myself was about to be tested again in ways I had not seen coming. I remember listening to the clerk call names and shuffle papers, and the sound echoed like pebbles dropping in a deep tin bucket far away. I remember feeling my hands tremble even though I had them pressed tight together so the shaking would not show. What I did not expect was the silence that followed. It was the kind of silence that moves like a storm cloud, heavy and slow across the sky, because everyone knew something big was coming. My daughter sat behind me and I could feel her presence like a warm hand on my back even though she was not touching me. She had already shown the first video earlier that morning, and the truth revealed in it had knocked the wind out of the entire room. The lies my husband had been telling for years had unraveled fast in that one moment, and yet here we were again standing at another level of truth that had been hidden even deeper. The judge cleared his throat, which sounded loud in the stillness, and he asked us all if we were ready to proceed. I said yes, though my voice cracked like a thin twig, but I meant it, because there comes a moment when you decide fear will not be the one steering the ship anymore. My daughter lifted a second device, and for a second I wondered what she had found this time. I wondered if I was ready to see the next piece of my life fall apart or come together, or both at the same time. The device lit up with a bright glow and the screen reflected on her face, making her look stronger, older and wiser than the girl I raised, and somehow still like that same child who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The video started slow, almost too slow, like it needed the whole room to settle its breath before it spoke its truth. I saw a date stamped at the bottom, not that I could call it by number because my mind had gone soft with shock, but I recognized the time in my life. It was a period when I had felt confused and tired and blamed myself for everything wrong in my marriage. I remembered asking my husband over and over if I had done something wrong, something unforgivable, something that made him pull away. I never got an answer then, but I was about to get it now in front of everyone. The video shook a little, like whoever held the phone had been nervous. Then it focused and I saw my husband in a room I had never seen before. A room he told me did not exist. A room he claimed belonged to a friend of his out of town, even though something inside me never believed it. He was laughing and I could hear another voice laughing too, a voice that slipped right into my chest like a splinter. It was a voice I recognized. A voice that belonged to a woman I had invited into my home once, thinking she needed help. A woman who had smiled at me with eyes too sweet and too smooth. A woman who told me she admired my marriage. I felt my stomach twist as the truth settled on me like a heavy coat. He had not just lied to me. He had used me. He had planned around me. And she had played along like she was auditioning for a part in a bad play. The people in the courtroom gasped, though it sounded more like a rustle this time because they had already been stunned once, and this revelation arrived like the second aftershock of an earthquake. Still strong enough to shake the room. Still powerful enough to break what had not cracked before. I watched him flirt and smile and talk about me like I was some distant shadow in the background of his life. He spoke with a confidence that made me wonder how long he had been rehearsing the parts he wanted the world to believe. He talked about money and property and a future plan that did not include me at all. And when the woman asked him what he would do if I found out, he laughed again. A low, cruel laugh that almost made my legs give out. My daughter paused the video and looked at the judge, who looked at me. I could see something in his face shift, something that leaned away from neutrality and toward a quiet understanding. He asked me if I needed a moment. I said no, even though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. But I had waited too long for the truth to run now. I had cried too many nights for the truth to sit quietly anymore. I told him to continue. When the video ended, the room stayed silent for a long stretch of time. People did not know where to look. They did not know if they should offer sympathy or shock or both. I did not know where to look either, but then my daughter reached forward and touched my arm lightly like she was saying, "Mama, you are not alone." And that touch steadied me in a way I had not felt in years. The judge asked my husband if he had anything to say, and for the first time in all the years I had known him, he looked small. He looked trapped by his own choices. He looked like a man who had built a tower of lies and finally realized the foundation was nothing more than sand. He opened his mouth and closed it again because there was nothing he could say. Truth has a way of stripping a man down to his last piece of pride and leaving him there in plain sight. The judge then asked me if I wanted to make a statement. I stood up slowly because my body felt heavier than usual, but also stronger, like something deep inside me had shifted. I told him that the woman in the video was someone I had trusted. I told him the lies my husband told had made me doubt my sanity for a long time. I told him I had stayed because I believed in vows and promises and family. I told him I had forgiven more than most people ever would. I told him that today I finally understood that love without respect is not love at all. And when I finished, I felt lighter, like a weight I had carried for years had finally slid off my shoulders and hit the ground. My daughter squeezed my hand and I felt gratitude rise in me like warm light. The judge nodded and wrote something down, and I saw a flicker of justice in his eyes, though I would not know the outcome until later. But in that moment the truth had been spoken, and that was enough. The silence in the courtroom felt different now. Not heavy, not sharp, just clear, clean, honest. And as I walked out into the hallway with my daughter beside me, I realized this fifth point of the hearing had not broken me. It had revealed me. It had shown me that even after betrayal, even after lies, even after feeling small and lost, I could still rise. I could still look truth in the eye and not flinch. I could still hold my head high with dignity intact. And that realization became the strength I needed for everything that came after. When the judge dismissed us for the day, I felt my knees loosen in a way I did not expect. Almost like my legs finally understood the battle was ending and they were allowed to tremble now. My daughter helped me gather my things, though she did not need to, because I still had strength in me. But sometimes a child tries to give back the care you once poured into them, and the sweetest thing you can do is accept it. We stepped into the hallway and the door of the courtroom shut behind us with a slow, heavy sound that reminded me of a chapter closing, not a sad one and not a joyful one, but one that needed to end so the next could begin. The building felt cooler than before, or maybe I had grown warm from everything that happened inside. The truth has a strange heat to it even when it hurts. We walked toward the elevators and I noticed how other people stepped aside for us, not in a rude way but in a soft, respectful way, like they understood that we were carrying something heavy and they wanted to give us room. I saw their eyes linger with sympathy and surprise and even admiration, though no one said a word. Sometimes the silence of others speaks louder than anything they could have said out loud. My daughter kept looking at me like she was checking to see if I would break. But I did not break. Instead, I felt a strange, powerful calm settle inside me, like warm water filling a cold basin. It was the calm that comes after a storm has blown through your house and torn down everything old and weak, leaving only the pieces strong enough to rebuild with. It was the calm that comes from knowing the truth even when the truth is sharp. It was the calm of a woman who finally saw herself clearly after years of being blurred by lies. We stepped outside and the sun was brighter than I remembered. The air felt fresh and cleaner, as if the world was offering me a breath I had been holding for too long. My daughter touched my arm and asked if I was all right, and I told her I was not all right yet, but I was becoming all right, and that felt even stronger than being all right. She smiled with tears in her eyes because she knew exactly what I meant. Growth hurts before it heals. Truth stings before it frees. Strength weighs heavy before it lifts. As we walked to the car, my thoughts wandered in every direction. Not the panicked wandering I used to feel at night when I wondered why my marriage had turned cold. Not the desperate wandering when I tried to understand why I felt small in my own home. This was a different kind of wandering. It was the slow, deliberate kind. The kind that feels like a mother folding laundry after something terrible has happened, but she keeps folding because life must move on. The kind that lets you pick up each thought, hold it to the light and decide whether it still belongs to you or whether it is time to let it go. I thought about the years I had spent shrinking myself to keep peace. I thought about the nights I stayed awake trying to figure out how to fix a problem that was never mine to fix. I thought about all the times my husband looked me in the eye and told me stories that were smooth as polished stones yet carried the weight of hidden intentions. I thought about how I doubted myself instead of him. How I believed his lies over my own instincts. How I trusted the wrong person and mistrusted the right one, which was myself. But then I thought about my daughter and the strength she showed when she gathered the evidence. The courage she had when she stood in front of a courtroom full of strangers to defend me. The love she carried that was strong enough to break open the truth. And I realized something important, something I should have known sooner. Even when I felt alone, even when I thought no one saw my pain, even when I believed I was invisible to the world, someone was watching, someone was learning, someone was growing, someone was waiting for the right moment to stand beside me. When we reached the car, I paused before getting in. Not because my legs hurt, though they did, or because my heart felt overwhelmed, though it was, but because I wanted to take one long moment to look at the sky. It stretched wide and open like a promise, and I let it wash over me. A deep breath settled in my chest, and for a second everything inside me went still and clear. I had survived the moment I once feared most. I had walked through fire and found myself on the other side with my spirit still intact, maybe a little scorched but still whole and stronger. We drove home in quiet, not the uncomfortable quiet of two people holding secrets, but the peaceful quiet of two people holding truth. My daughter kept glancing at me and I kept giving her a little smile to let her know I was fine. At one point she reached over and took my hand and held it like she did when she was a child crossing the street. And I realized then that there is no age limit on needing your mama or being a mama. When we reached home, I sat at the kitchen table and my daughter made tea for both of us. The house felt different now, lighter almost, as if the lies that once filled the corners had finally dissolved, leaving space for new air. Fresh air, honest air. I sipped the tea and felt warmth travel through my chest and settle in my bones. My daughter sat across from me and told me she was proud of me. I felt tears rise, but I did not let them fall, not out of pride but out of gratitude, because hearing those words from your own child carries a kind of healing no doctor can prescribe. Later that evening, when she went to pick up her kids, I stayed alone in the quiet of the house and let myself feel everything. The sorrow, the anger, the shock, the confusion, the relief, the strength, the freedom. I let every emotion wash through me without resisting, because each feeling was a part of the healing. I walked from room to room, touching little things that once belonged to a life that looked different. I let myself mourn the version of me who stayed too long and trust too hard. I thanked her gently because she did the best she could with the knowledge she had. And then I allowed myself to become the woman I was growing into. I looked around the house and for the first time in a long while I imagined a future that did not frighten me. A future that did not require me to make myself small. A future where my voice mattered. A future where I could laugh again without wondering who was judging me. A future where I could wake up feeling whole instead of worried. A future where love could enter only through doors I opened, not through cracks someone else created. I realized forgiveness would come, but not today. Maybe not tomorrow, but it would come in its own time. Not for his sake but for mine. Forgiveness is not forgetting. It is releasing yourself from holding on to poison. And I was ready to let the poison leave my body drop by drop until there was nothing left inside that belonged to him. That night as I lay in bed the world felt still. I closed my eyes and breathed deep, and for the first time in years I did not feel afraid. I felt strong. I felt brave. I felt free. And that was the final truth I needed. The truth that came after every lie had shattered. The truth that stood tall even after everything fell apart. The truth that belonged fully to me. I was finally done surviving. I was ready to begin living.